What's up, dads? Your boy Big Dave back with another episode of Culture Dads, Age of Sword and Cassette. Today we are going to talk about some pretty dad stuff. We're going back into the dad zone to talk about children's literature and children's entertainment and stuff like that, because this is something that when you become a dad, especially in current year, you are like a hawk looking for this crap, like subversion and all this stuff. And a lot of us go back into the classics, or at least we try to introduce our kids to the classics. So what's going on, Mr. Mike?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, man. It's been a bit of a blast from the past, sort of binging a lot of this shit here for this episode, just doing the R&D and everything. But yeah, you're right, man. It's like when you start to have to curate your children's like consumption or whatever, things change a little bit. Like you start to pick up on things. You start to develop these spidey senses that you didn't have before about these, like, subversive currents and everything like that. It's funny because, every parent throughout all of history has done the exact same thing. But a lot of it is different. Like, our parents were sort of like more on the lookout for stuff that's like too violent or,
too sexual.
Yeah, exactly. But like we are looking out for something very, very different. And actually, something much, much more pervasive.
Yeah.
It would be like, if our parents were facing the same situation for what it is that they were concerned about, it'd be like your kid going onto YouTube, you know what I mean? And just being able to find the most depraved shit, the most violent stuff, like watching snuff videos, like that would be all accessible to the kids. That's the analogy, for what it is that we are trying to protect them from. So, yeah, we've got our work cut out for us, basically.
Yeah, big time. My parents, when I was growing up, my mom was, typical 90s, bought into all the stuff. She was worried about me playing Mortal Kombat and things being too violent and things I was reading being too disturbing, and my parents were actually pretty liberal in this. They weren't, they're not politically liberal, but they were pretty liberal in this kind of area. They were pretty much like, my parents were like pretty much cool with me listening to whatever I wanted. And like I told the story before. My dad watched the heavy metal movie with me when I was pretty young, right? So it was like my parents were pretty liberal about it, but I did have some friends that were like totally long-housed. I had a friend growing up. He came over, and it was for my birthday party when I was like 10 or something like that. And we did. You remember the game for Super Nintendo, Killer Instinct?
Oh yeah,
yeah. We had a Killer Instinct tournament for my birthday, right? We all did the thing outside. Then we all went in and piled up and did a big Killer Instinct tournament. Well, he went home and, told his parents how he had a good time, and we played video games and they dug into it. And his mom had a fit, and he wasn't allowed to come over and hang out anymore because he played Killer Instinct. Like, big fucking deal. Sake. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, like this is for guys, that are a bit younger or whatever. I mean, Mortal Kombat, when it came along, was just like, it was too much. It was too much for a lot of people, a lot of parents especially. And there was like this big uproar about like violence in video games. It was at the time when like arcade games especially, but even like home console games were getting to where it was like, you could depict graphic violence in a way that you kind of couldn't on the NES and everything. And Mortal Kombat was really the big step forward for like graphic violence in video games. And Killer Instinct was several years later, maybe like one generation later. It came out on the N64. It wasn't like,
no, it was for Super Nintendo. It was like,
was it?
Yeah, it was the first game, the first Nintendo game to have a black cartridge.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, it was like several years later. Mortal Kombat came out in like 91 or something like that. And Killer Instinct would have been about 94, 95 or something, roughly. And Killer Instinct was like more of a fantasy fighting game where you had like crazy like the fighters, like one of the guys was like just basically like this magma, like lava man guy and everything like that. And like it was I mean obviously it was violent because it was it was a fighting game, but it wasn't graphically violent, like you rip the guy's head off and his spine is dangling or something. Nothing like that. It was pretty tame, you know what I mean, in terms of the graphic violence. So yeah, what Dave is explaining about his friend like not being able to come over again, and like it's like that's going way too far, way too fucking far.
But that wasn't uncommon back then, back in the 90s, where there was so much. You guys want to talk about like Longhouse, cancel culture, and all that kind of stuff? Dude, the church ladies in the 80s and 90s. I know we've ragged on this a bunch of times, but they were the worst. They were the worst. They convinced an entire like generation of housewives that Pokemon was satanic and had satanic messages in it, and like Tales from the Crypt was like the worst thing. It's just they just couldn't let a nigga live.
Yeah, and I mean, in their defense, not that I'll defend them very much, the transition between like 1985 and 1995 in terms of like not just video games but also music and movies. Well, movies were always pretty violent, but especially like music and everything was really, things became very explicit very quickly. That's when you got the rise of like they would have to put on like parental advisory explicit lyrics and everything like that. The rise of gangster rap and all this stuff that like genuinely was like probably a 10-year-old boy should not be listening to NWA.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When I was a kid, like my parents, like Dave's, were pretty liberal in this way. Like they didn't really stop me from listening to basically anything. But there was one time that was like, it was so fucking cringy. I was listening to the Chili Peppers 1991 album, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. And there was one track on there. I mean, this is not an album that's like, right up there with like Two Live Crew or anything. But there was one track on it called Suck My Kiss. And like the refrain at the end of the chorus goes like, give to me sweet sacred bliss. Your mouth was made to suck my kiss. And I was just like, I was listening to that's what happens at the very end of the song. And my mom was walking by at the same time as I was listening to that. And I saw her walk by and I hit the stop button just before he said kiss. And she gave me the most fucking dirty look I've ever seen in my life. I was like, I should have just let that shit play, dude. Like, you can imagine what she would have thought. So anyway, but my parents were pretty good about that stuff. I was allowed to like ride my bike down to the arcade and go play Mortal Kombat. I was allowed to like, watch most horror movies. I think there was some that I was like maybe not allowed to watch, but I can't even remember which ones or anything. So, my parents were pretty good about that. I think a lot of parents were back then, but there was definitely like a subset of the culture that was just like trying very, very hard to hold all of that shit at bay. But I mean, now we're up against something quite different. I mean, like kids shows are not like any more violent than they were back in like, the Transformers days or anything like that, but
they're less violent.
Yeah, actually you're probably right. You're probably right. They are. Violent. Yeah. So, but that doesn't mean less problematic.
Yeah. I would actually much rather my son see like, He-Man going and like kicking everybody's ass, or G.I. Joe's going and having a shootout with, Cobra Commander than some of the stuff that gets snuck in with this like what's that one? It's really, really bad. Steven Universe or something like that. My kids aren't allowed to see that. It just looks demonic to me. And on top of it, it's like I really, really despise the art style that appears in a lot of the children's entertainment now. It's just not I don't know. It just repulses me. It's like one half Disney, one half anime, and there's no detail or shading. It's like very dumbed down and ugly looking. And I just don't want my kids their minds to be shaped. I want them to have a similar view of aesthetics as I do, where you look at art, it depicts a man. He should be muscular and cool. You know what I mean? Not gay.
Yeah, and even just like on the sort of aesthetic level of like the art style and rendering, not just like what people look like per se, like in terms of their build or whatever, but also like you just don't want your kids to sit down and like look at uncanny and ugly shit all day and get an idea that that's like cool. You know, like one of the things that I hate, and I think we talked about this, but I think I might have mentioned it in an earlier episode. I really have always hated CGI. Like it just looks uncanny and shitty to me. And actually, you know what I've noticed? I've noticed in the last few years that it has finally got to where it doesn't look that bad to me, because somehow some sort of technical innovation has happened where they can now do like some like pretty reasonable texturing on these like CGI. Like they obviously do CGI animation because it's cheap, right? But now only like recently has it started to look like not like demonically ugly to me. Like it's just always looked horrible. Like when I first saw, you know, when I was a kid, like, you know, I was a very early teenager when The Lion King came out. And then like not long after that was like Toy Story. And the difference between those two in terms of like aesthetic, like visual style was like Toy Story just looked horrific to me. It looked ugly, like really, truly ugly. Whereas like the traditional animation style, like still looks good. But yeah, I just like there has got to be some sort of a cumulative effect of a kid sitting there and just like watching this like, you know, uncanny, shitty CGI all day. And like, that's my childhood. You know what I mean? Like that alone, I think is worth protecting your kids from.
Yeah. I got to say, you know, speaking of like Toy Story and some of the, I guess Pixar stuff during that era, my kids do watch some of that, and going back and watching Toy Story compared to what they're coming out with now, dude, Toy Story was actually pretty wholesome. You know what I mean? It's pretty wholesome. It was about.
I'm not commenting on like the plot or anything like that. Just the visual style.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree. I do think it's. But you know what? There were some other 3D movies that came out kind of around that time of Toy Story that are so much worse. Do you remember there was one? It was about like a Christmas train or something like that. It's called like the Golden Express, or I can't remember what it was called, but it is it's nightmare fuel. You watch that thing, like their the way their eyes move and their facial expressions. It's like, oh my god, your skin crawl. And it bombed too. When it came out, it bombed because everybody thought it was so scary looking. They thought it was like, I don't know. It does look demonic. It's terrible. But that's so it's, you know, I feel like I'm such a boomer all the time these days, because like, you know, this stuff, I guess it was, you know, it was a slippery slope, or I guess, I don't know. It's like we liked what we had. And you know what? I do think that the stuff that we had, although it was kind of over the top and a lot of it was violent and it was a little bit wacky and stuff like that, it was not like what we have today that we got to protect our kids from. But I guess there's the argument that it was a slippery slope and we don't get to choose when to get off. I don't know. You know, I don't know how to feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, like we were kind of, when we came of age, I mean, Dave and I are a few years apart in age, but roughly when like both of us sort of, you know, we're on the cusp of being teenagers onto like young adults, is when there was quite a sea change in the aesthetics of the art, as I've just mentioned. But also there was a bit of a change in like the politics as well. Like it comes especially like maybe half a generation later in the 2010s and everything like that, with the rise. I mean, the Obama era in the US was really the time when I started to notice like massive politicization of like messaging in movies and messaging in everything. And even like, you know, kids TV and everything like that. But one of the things that I mean, it does sound like kind of like a boomer take, which is funny because this is a Gen X thing. But, stuff like The Simpsons was the beginning of, I don't know when the beginning started, but it was definitely when it became noticeable that the idea of like the family father had to be the butt of a joke, right?
Oh,
like
I hate it.
he Homer could not be a, strong paternal figure. He had to be a punchline. Right. And I mean, they did it well. It was funny and everything like that, but it was also really bad. Like, that's when I started to kind of notice a little bit of, there was like some serious like political subversion in Hollywood and animation and everything in general. And that sort of like kept going on through the 2000s into the 2010s. And by the time, like I say, by the time the Obama era was in full swing, I mean, the culture war was like very much out in the open at that point. And it was just like, all pretense of civility had been dropped, and it was just like straight up fucking propaganda. So yeah, but it goes back even further than that too. But of course, that's when I really noticed it.
Yeah, I for folks that follow my stuff, I rail against that all the time. The subversion of the father figure in pop culture. The father becomes an idiot. He becomes a fat moron. He becomes a loser. And the mom is always the smart, hot, like one. It's like far more sinister now. Like that seems innocent compared to, but that was the beginning of it. I hate it. Your Homer Simpsons, your Peter Griffins, your King of Queens, your everything, right? Dad is always a loser and a fat retard, and it makes me sick. Because before that, Dad was always like the cool guy. He was the strong guy. He was the guy you didn't want to disappoint. You know what I mean? He comes home from work and you did something bad. You got to, and I know like there's some like Leave It to Beaver ass kind of corny stuff but that was a far better depiction of the father than what's going on, what happened in the 90s and 2000s. You know what I mean? So I really, that makes me sick. I think that was one of the most subversive things to ever come into pop culture. And, that's part of the reason we call this podcast The Culture Dads, is to make the dad archetype cool again, because the dad is cool.
The dad's the archetype of cool.
Yeah.
he really is. And it's taken generations of like concerted top-down pressure to change that and to make that into something like that's kind of like, fogey-ish and stupid and everything like that. Like, you get this idea that it's always been like that like people have just like always thought that the older generation was like stupid and didn't know anything or was like corny and whatever. But like if just a look back through history tells you that it's actually quite the opposite, where, when a people or a civilization is kind of on the upswing, typically what they believe about themselves is that they are inferior to their fathers, right?
Yeah.
Like you think about the Romans, for example, they had this, the word for elders was mayores, which is cognate to our word major, which for them meant elders, but it also meant betters. So your elders were your betters, right? Like they were the superiors. They were the people who were better than you. And that they had their word for tradition was mos maiorum, which is the custom of the elders, but it also means the custom of the superiors, right? So that's like, and this mos maiorum was the fundamental epistemological and like moral principle behind their whole social order and everything like that. So these people believed that like, previous generations were superior to themselves and that like things were kind of going downhill and like, we're not the people that our fathers were and everything. And at the same time, they were conquering the world and becoming the most powerful and perhaps consequential society ever to exist. So, and you could think of the Greeks as well, the time of Hesiod, where Hesiod believed that, like, the myth of the ages, where we had a golden age and then a silver age and a bronze age, and it continues and goes down and down and down. This was at the time when the Greeks were becoming the most consequential people that had ever existed up until that point as well. So this is, and you could keep going and going and going through history. It's the same story. When we believe that we are superior to our earlier generations, think of something like the late antiquity. This would be a time when people genuinely believed that of themselves, and their civilization was falling apart. And then you get the opposite. So, this is, I think it's an emblem of where we are right now. The idea that, like, the Peter Griffins of the world could be the archetype of the father and everything like that. And of course, that's just a symptom of where we're at. So, yeah.
Exactly. And speaking of going backwards and kind of trashing guys in history, there's a one of everybody's favorites when it comes to children's literature that has gotten the heat in the last few years. And that is the late, great Dr. Seuss, right? Who don't love a little bit of Dr. Seuss? Especially if you grew up in America, or probably Canada, or anywhere in the English-speaking world, you have read a fair amount of Dr. Seuss. Now, he gets beat up on our side a little bit too, and he really gets canceled and beat up and torn apart by the leftoids. But, we talk about this a lot. This is becoming a recurring theme here on Culture Dads, is that great men kind of sort of break the mold, and they sort of don't stand on any side, and they're kind of their own thing, and they end up with, like, everybody beating them up. And I think that Dr. Seuss, in his own way, in a smaller way, sort of falls into this, right? And I want to talk about Dr. Seuss a little bit and kind of talk about who he was, and then get into, like, how genius he was in his own way. And the reason this kind of came up for me is that there's been quite a few times where folks who have read my poetry have said that I sound a little bit like Dr. Seuss. And I'm like thinking, it's like, dude, I read Dr. Seuss to my kids. I read it when I was a kid. I would never have thought to, like, list him among my influences as a poet. But, and then the more I think about it, Dr. Seuss is probably the first poetic sort of work that I was exposed to, and it probably had some sort of influence on me subconsciously that stuck with me. So I went back and, I did a serious think on it. Oh, the things you can think, right? And I think that he probably did have an influence on me. And when I go back and I read Dr. Seuss to my kids now, and I look at him as a poet, I really started to appreciate how brilliant he really was, and how as a creative mind. So when we talk about Dr. Seuss, we got to kind of give a little bit of a history lesson. I'm not going to make it a whole big biography. There's plenty of biographies out there on the guy. But Dr. Seuss was the son of, like, German immigrants. His father owned a brewery. He was actually a very successful brewer. And then Prohibition came along and pretty much trashed his whole existence. And his family became very poor. And, they started to work themselves out. And, old Dr. Seuss's dad, which Dr. Seuss's real name is actually Theodore Geisel. And his dad got his feet under him, and they did this kind of stuff. But then Dr. Seuss, he got a little bit older. He started doing work, and he eventually made his way into college. And he made his way into college, and he was not really considered a good writer. He was actually considered pretty lousy. But Dr. Seuss was actually kind of a Chad. He was really good at sports. He was an athletic guy. He was a really smart guy. He excelled in a lot of different things. He was just a multi-talented, weird, kind of eccentric dude. And he, I forget what it was called, but he was the writer for a comedy periodical at his college. Well, because he was kind of a Chad and kind of a party animal, he got busted drinking. And this was a big deal back then because Prohibition was going on. So he got shit canned from his spot as like the lead editor of this magazine or periodical or newspaper that he did. I believe it was called it just slipped my mind again. I can't remember, but it doesn't matter. So he got fired from there. So he, being a clever kind of troublemaker guy that he was, he came up with the pseudonym Dr. Seuss, so he could continue doing it and fly under the radar. So he did that. Well, later on things go on for him, and he puts out his first ever published book, which was called I think it was called like 101 Boners or something like that, which
no
means
fucking way. No way.
It was like, so boners back then was, it meant something a little bit different than what it means now, right?
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So a boner back then meant like it was either a joke or like an error, like, oh, I made a boner. Like our modern definition of boner is not what it was back then, right? If you would have told him, hey, what are you doing writing books about hard-ons? He would have been like, what are you talking about? It wouldn't have gone over. So he writes this book. It actually doesn't do very good. And, things go on. And eventually, obviously, he gets his flowers, right? He starts to get pretty popular with his children's writing. And then he gets hired to be a propagandist for the war effort. Now, Dr. Seuss was a very staunch American patriot, very, very staunch American patriot. He was very against the Japanese and the Germans and everything like this. And also he got paid to do a lot of propaganda for the war effort. And this is where he gets kind of beat up on both sides because he does not depict the Japanese in a very favorable way, right? He gives them really slanty eyes and the buck teeth and makes them look kind of ugly and stupid looking.
Yeah.
He wrote a lot of stuff like depicting, just old timey depictions of other races that modern, leftoids get all spurged out about, right? He was, but he was a little bit of a progressive in his thinking in some ways. And he was kind of like a little bit of everything, right? It's kind of hard to pin down what he actually believed because he was a little bit of a mercenary and was getting paid to do this stuff and did it very, very well. He actually did a full on war propaganda documentary that he directed that was like really, he actually won awards for it. As a propagandist, the guy was like a legitimately good propagandist. So
he
after the war,
was,
if you go watch I can't remember, it was called like Prestige and Death or something. I can't remember what it was called. It has a pretty hard. The title goes hard. Like it's very emotional and he really masterfully crafts this film. But anyway, time goes on. He continues writing. He actually went on the side and did some adult writing. Like he did some, he tried his hand at erotic fiction, which was pretty popular at the time. I think he did it under a different pen name, so he wouldn't get the two things conflated together. And it flopped because he said he couldn't draw sexy ladies. The ladies that he drew were all frumpy and weird looking, like they are in his normal comics. Yeah. But he mostly just focused on kids' works. Now, another reason he gets beat up is because Dr. Seuss was a little bit of a philanderer. Who were we talking about before? That was was that H.G. Wells? It was
Wells. Yeah.
Wells was a philanderer. Well, Dr. Seuss was the same kind of thing. And this is probably the worst thing about him is that he had a wife. His first wife was really sick for like years and years and years. It wouldn't get better. She had cancer and she fought her like most of her life. And Dr. Seuss was like, I'm going to go get me something somewhere else. So he did. And this like his wife like did not take it well. She like blamed herself and like all this kind of stuff. And she killed herself. She eventually committed suicide. Yeah.
Fuck.
Which also, Dr. Seuss, he wasn't cool with that. He wasn't like, oh, fuck her. That fucked him up. You know what I mean? But he went on, he married another woman and he stayed with her for the rest of his life. He probably fooled around on her too. But that was just the nature of the beast, the kind of guy that he was. Very not too dissimilar from H.G. Wells, right? But Dr. Seuss goes on he never had any kids himself, but he was very much described as somebody that could put himself in the shoes of a child, and up until he had like this like wonder and this imagination of a child from when he was little, that he kept it until the day he died. And if you go and you read his children's books, they were fucking brilliant. Some of them have some of the most wholesome messages there is. Like, obviously, some of them we could politically disagree with, some of them we politically agree with, et cetera, et cetera. But as a creator, speaking of dads, he has that book Hop on Pop. Dude, Hop on Pop is about kids having a fun and loving dad and being part of a family. He's one of my favorites is Oh, the Thinks You Can Think. It's about like imagination and like actually using your brain and like all this kind of stuff. And some of the weaving of words that he does, we could get into some of the. I want to bring up a few stanzas from some of his works to show you guys like really how brilliant he was. But before I keep back, and Mike, give us your take on Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, so I mean, you've mentioned Hop on Pop. That's one that it is a big one in my house. That was read many, many, many times. I mean, Dr. Seuss was important to me as a child, as he was for a lot of people. He's important for my kids. He will be around. He will be around for many, many generations and maybe forever, because although some of his books do have a bit of a heavy-handed message, for the most part, they're just fun. For the most part, they're just like kids. They're just goofy and funny, and like the wordplay is absolutely hilarious. Like, like with the internal rhyme schemes and everything like that. Yeah. Like, kids sit up and they notice that stuff, and it's for probably most people, Dr. Seuss is like the beginning of their realizing that you can do crazy shit with language. You know what I mean? Like, sonically, and just like you did the effect of the, like, bringing words into conjunction with other words by rhyme. This is like, it's kind of psychedelic, really, for little kids. And couple that with like the uncanny and I always found Dr. Seuss's not animation, but his like drawings and art style to be a little bit scary, actually, as a kid. Yeah. And I think a lot of kids do. But like, the bizarreness, the like silly, offbeat, off the wall craziness of the rhyme schemes, plus like bringing you into this world of these like weird looking, like nothing is quite human and nothing is quite an animal, and everything is just like this weird sort of thing that has these like fuzzy like feet and like wearing gloves and bizarre, like the art style is just so much its own thing, coupled with the literary style, which is just so much its own thing. I mean, he creates a world. Right. This is what makes Dr. Seuss brilliant, is that he creates a world that you can inhabit. Guys know that I'm a big fan of Nirvana, and one of the things, like, I've for a long time was like watching interviews and everything like that, and like the really tall, gangly bass player in the band, obviously long after Kurt Cobain died, was asked like, what is it? Why was he so successful? Like, what was it that people saw in him? And he stopped for a second and he thought about it, and he said, it's because he created his own world. It's because he, when you like hear a Nirvana song, it's Nirvana instantly, not just because of the sound of the voice, but because of the like kind of like funny way that he would like play words off each other and like, use like opposites and just like the, also the like, tune smithing and like melodic style. You just know that it's him. It's just got that stamp. Right? It's because he created his own world. It's a world that you can inhabit. It's a world that you can kind of like live in. There's like this weirdness to it that like just makes it its own thing. And it's the exact same thing with Dr. Seuss. He made his own world, and it was a world that like kids can like inhabit and live in. And in a broader sense, this is what I'm talking about when I say in our sphere, we need to make this a thing that people can live in. We need to make it a thing that people can inhabit, and not just go into it for political hot takes, not just go into it for like red pills, not just go into it for venting about the system and like venting your resentment against whatever. It has to be a place that we can live. It has to be a place where, as Dave has said in an early episode, look, guys, we're going to be here for a while. It's like the shit's not going to turn around tomorrow. We need to like build a space that is livable for us all, and that includes aesthetically. Well, on a smaller scale, that's exactly what Dr. Seuss does, and I think that's what makes him successful. It's also what makes him a great propagandist as well. Like, one of the things that he can do very, very well, even though, his wartime propaganda, I mean, a lot of it is stuff that like we would take issue with and everything, but it's like he is just so good at making a point very, very simply and with very few words and very few images. This is what makes a propagandist really talented. And the only person I can really think of, to be honest, I mean, you could think of like other propagandists since him. Well, think about guys that are kind of like nominally on our side or whatever. Think of like that Ben Garrison guy or whatever.
Yeah.
He does a really good job. But some of his takes are kind of like boomerish or whatever, but he's still good at it. And he still does like, he gets some real zingers in there. But I would say the only person that comes close to Dr. Seuss as a propagandist is probably Stone Toss.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, man. Like that guy could just like, like you could tell that like the guy who draws that stuff, like Stone Toss artist, is like a genuinely sharp political mind. You know what I mean? Like he's just able to really boil shit down to a very, very simple situation where he can, he could just sort of express the absurdity of like something that's going on or whatever in just like 2 panels, you know what I mean? Or like something time. So fucking simple. Like you think of that, like the one I like the most is the one where it's like, it's the tug of war one. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, oh yeah.
That one to me is just so like, it's just perfect. He just hits the nail right on the head, and he hits the nail on the head on a lot of occasions as well.
The working class one where he's like, the commies, like I support working. Oh, Stucks, put it here, pal.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, fuck you.
His panels are so poignant and so punchy that people on the internet use them as arguments.
Exactly. And there's like a whole subgenre of like Stone Toss, like left-wing appropriations, where it's like they've basically taken these things and they like change the captions of like what people are saying or whatever, and then they make it like anti-fa version or something stupid like that. But it's like, it's just like just testament to the guy's brilliance, right? Mm-hmm. I obviously Dr. Seuss is famous for being a children's writer more than a propagandist. But I mean, I would put the two of them, in the same class in terms of like their political cartoons and everything like that. And Stone Toss might even come out on top. But Dr. Seuss has the same kind of thing. He's able to sort of boil things down to a very simple message that just like really, it's just hard to argue against, you know what I mean, when you just see it or whatever. So he is quite a formidable figure as a rhetorician, I would say. Obviously, as a children's author, the literary quality of it is only going to rise so high, but there are some definite literary qualities to the poetry that he has in there. But before I go on about that, I'll throw it back to you, Dave, because I know you got a lot to say about this.
Yeah, I just, as somebody that really appreciates the sound of words, I think something that gets overlooked a lot is how words sound, and kind of the sonic quality of the words themselves lending to the aesthetic of the literary work. I that was kind of like really boiled out in the rise of the modern reductionist kind of stuff. And then when you get into postmodern art, it's completely seen as superfluous and like to do it is like a crime. You know what I mean? But Dr. Seuss just kind of like flies. Dr. Seuss is a fantasist. This guy, you know, he makes up words. He's all over the place. And there's another guy I'm going to bring up later on that is of this similar quality that does this thing. And he's also a fantasist and all this. But one of my favorite things with Dr. Seuss is how much he weaves rhymes in rhymes, and he just does it so I'm going to just read one of my favorite stanzas from
please.
Is just pick the shorter one from Fox and Socks, which is my favorite one. Fox and Socks is the king tongue twister of Seuss's work. You know, there's people. It's like part of the fun of reading Fox and Socks to your kids is like you getting tongue twisted and mixing it all up and reading it wrong, and your kids laughing about it because it's just silly and fun. And it's kind of a challenge to be able to read it without getting tongue tied, right? And this is one of my favorites here. He says, "Try to say this, Mr. Knox, please. Through 3 cheese trees, 3 free fleas flew. While these fleas flew, freezy breeze blew. Freezy breeze made these 3 trees freeze. Freezy trees made these trees cheese freeze. That's what made these 3 free fleas sneeze." You know, so it's like he just like layers his rhymes on rhymes on rhymes.
That's fucking brilliant,
so brilliant.
Dude.
It's so good. And you got the one part about the Tweedle Beetle battles. You know, Tweedle Beetle battles in a battle, in a puddle, in a muddle with a duddle, in a fucking poodle, in a noodle eating boodle, whatever the fuck he says. But it's like, it's so brilliant. It's genius. And I think that, you know, as I mentioned before, maybe some of that got like rubbed off on me because I just love the sound and the cadence and the rhymes and everything. And it creates, as you mentioned, it's Dr. Seuss there's a little bit of something spooky about him.
Yeah.
And it's high weirdness. As you mentioned, it's truly psychedelic. You know what I mean? It's something it's like truly just weird fantasy stuff where you go into the Seuss world and nothing is like, everything is sort of familiar, but it's not familiar, and it's weird and weaving and wobbly and strange, and I just adore it, and I think that it's perfect for kids. And I think sometimes kids are smarter than adults when it comes to how they appreciate certain things. They just innately know when something is good and cool and like elevated, right? They just immediately react to it. They laugh or they like get excited or whatever because they haven't had these like internal structures of logic that adults get that gets thrusted upon adults that we have to develop over time to decide whether or not something is good or like something. Now, obviously, kids, because of how they are very impressionable, and that's a bad thing, but it's also a good thing, right? So I just think Dr. Seuss he's just the man.
Oh yeah, for sure. And there's so much going on below the surface of a lot of his books, right? Like, you know, guys who listen to this podcast, that guys who are familiar with Imperium will know how important the domestic cult is to me and, you know, to our people, right? And to Europeans as like a folk group and everything like that. One of the favorite books in our house, and this has been a favorite for a long time. There was like, you know, a stint where we were just basically reading this book and this book alone for like weeks on end. Was a book called "There's a Wocket in My Pocket."
Oh,
do you know that one?
Hell yeah.
That one is so fucking good, man. It's because he creates a world. He creates like a set of characters, and like actually what it only sort of in thinking about it for this episode, like going back through the Dr. Seuss material, it occurred to me that what he's basically talking about here are domestic spirits of some kind, right? Like, so what this book is it's just like him going through, this house and saying like, there's a did you ever have a feeling that there's a wasket in your basket or a neuro in your bureau? And he's like drawing these like crazy fantasy characters of like things that just inhabit different parts of the house. Sometimes I feel quite certain there's a jertin in the curtain, and he's got like this like weird looking like bird thing that's like got like bird legs and like hiding behind the curtain, and it's really creepy and shit. You know what I mean? It's like that kind of stuff. And he just goes through this whole house and like he goes through all these like weird characters and everything. And it's just this crazy fantasy world. And like my kids just ate it up. They just love this one. This is such a like important book for them. You know what I mean? But also there's some like, Dr. Seuss also, and I don't think that this is something that's planned or whatever. Many times he will actually sort of use a real like kind of prosody. Like he'll use a rhyme scheme that is like a classical rhyme scheme or whatever. So something like green eggs and ham. I mean, like you think of the classic, I do not like them, Sam I am. I do not like green eggs and ham. This is an I am, right? And in many cases, he will actually he'll use like an iambic pentameter. He'll actually use like 5 feet or whatever. It's kind of like uncanny the way that he does some of this stuff. And in what's another one? The Cat in the Hat is another one where he does this, but instead of the iambic pentameter, he's using dactyls. He's using like a da 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 da. We looked and we saw him step on the mat. We looked and we saw him, the cat in the hat. And he said to us, why do you sit there like that? That kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. He's
using a completely different rhyme scheme. It's similar to like, 'twas the night before Christmas and all through the house, that kind of thing, right? Actually, I think that's an anapest. But anyway, it's the da-da-da kind of rhyme scheme. He does this all throughout his books and everything. And most books have like their own set rhyme scheme, and it has an effect. He actually plays the effect, like the Cat in the Hat, for example. Okay, so what the dactyl is doing, what the da 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 is doing, at least in Homeric poetry, which is where it's found, is it's a galloping sort of meter. It's like all of a sudden action is happening. And like you're just thrown into it, and like crazy shit is happening. You're thrown in medias res in the middle of things, and boom, you're just like straight into the action, right? And that's what's happening in The Cat in the Hat. Basically, for people who don't know the story, there's these 2 kids that are just sitting around on a rainy day, and all of a sudden this like crazy cat bursts through the door, and he's just like doing all this wacky shit and like playing all these games and entertaining them, and it's just chaos. And the fish is getting upset about it, and like the fish is kind of like this Tyrrhic figure that's like, no, we need to have order. And the cat's like, fuck you, it's chaos. And then he's just like da 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 da, and the rhyme scheme perfectly links up with the content, right? So I don't think that this is something that like Dr. Seuss is consciously thinking of, but it's something that happens when you're in the zone as an artist and everything is just happening, right? Like everything's just going exactly the way it's supposed to be, and shit is just like coming together in ways that you did not expect, right? And this is, you could tell that this is what's going on in The Cat in the Hat and certain other of his books and everything like that, where you get the link up between the content and the form, right? This is what brilliant poetry does. It plays the form and the content off of each other, and it's just hilarious that this is something that 3 and 4 year olds are like listening to, and they're getting that in their head. They're getting like just the rhythm, the sort of like at the deepest level, the sort of like base of your spine level, like just hitting you with that like rhythmic meter that is like Homeric poetry, and it's action and it's all happening and it's the same thing. It's just I think it's absolutely brilliant the way that the guy is able to pull this shit off, and this is what makes him stand tall like a giant above other like children's writers. It's the poetry, it's the brilliance in the poetry that really does it.
Exactly. And there's quite a few times, especially now that I go back and I read some of his quotes and his poems and his books and like all this kind of stuff, and I see some meaningful philosophical things in there, right? It's not just like about politics. Like, so here's one you guys listening are probably going to be familiar with. This one. This is one that like teachers hang on their walls at school and all this kind of stuff. But this is one that I personally really, really like. And I just want to extrapolate on it. So he says, today you are you. That is truer than true. There is no one alive who is youer than you. Shout aloud, I am glad to be what I am. Thank goodness I'm not a ham or a clam or a dusty old jar of gooseberry jam. I am what I am. What a great thing to be. If I say so myself, happy every day to me. Is what he says. And that is some Marcus Aurelius meditation shit, right? That's like he's saying, don't even worry about what the world is doing. Like, what does Marcus Aurelius say? I know there's some critiques about Stoicism and everything, but Marcus Aurelius was the man, and he's got a lot of meaningful things to say in his book. And some of the big things that stick out to me with Marcus Aurelius is don't even worry about like the world. Like he says so many things like death is always smiling at you. It'll never stop smiling at you. So just smile back and just be you to become your full potential of what you were supposed to be. Like, don't worry about what everything else is going on. Worry about what you can control and do your best at that and become, everything, become you. Yeah. Today you are you. That is truer than true. And no one alive is youer than you. Right. And I know that some people could interpret that as like individualism kind of stuff, but I don't think so. I think it's like a more of a like a teleological thing, I guess, like you reaching your fate, your telos, your ultimate purpose kind of thing. And then also he says, this is like, thank goodness I'm not a ham or a clam or a dusty old jar of gooseberry jam. Right. He's saying like thank I thank God that I'm a human being and I get to experience life and be me. And what does Marcus Aurelius say? He says, every day you throw open the windows and let the sun shine on you, because someday the sun will set and then you too will as well. So rejoice in your time that you're alive, that you get to be this, right? And also there's some like, we're talking about it's like differential ontology. You are youer than you, and that is meaningful because you're not a ham or a clam or a dusty old jar of gooseberry jam. And he says, he's so happy. He says, if I say so myself, or he says, I am what I am. What a great thing to be. If I say so myself, happy every day to me. Like every day, wake up and just.
It's pretty life affirming.
It's very life affirming. It's very positive. And what a great message for kids. Just become who you are, the best possible thing you can be. Don't worry about this other horse shit, right? Just reach your full potential. Throw open the windows and let the sun shine, because someday the sun will stop, and rejoice in every day that you are youer than you.
Yeah. Well, I think the message there is so fundamental that it actually does admit of like multiple interpretations. And I think that the individualist one is valid, but also at the same time, you could you could interpret that as a kind of just acceptance of your thrownness into the world, right? You are the thing that you are. That's never going to change. So just be that. Just be what you are, kind of thing. Become what you are, as you said. It's like it really does sort of affirm the like just brute facticity of one's being in the world. And I know this sounds like we're really reaching. We're reading something deeply like out of this like quote that you see in like elementary school classrooms and everything, but I think that that's there. I think that there's a reason why it resonates with people, and it's because of that. It's because for every person who ever thought of themselves as like oh, I wish I was this, or I wish I had like this kind of hair, or I wish I had like I wish I was this kind of person, had this family or whatever. It's like no, you need to accept what you are. You need to love what you are, or whatever. Like we as Europeans are very privileged, and we know it, right? Like Europeans have basically done like just about everything worth celebrating in history. But the fact is that if I was something else, if I was like a Yoruban or some sort of a like Zomian goat herd or something, I would celebrate that too. I'd be proud of that too. I'd be like, no, fuck that. Like, my people are the best, right? Like, there's
Hell
nothing, there's nothing, anybody who doesn't do that, anybody who doesn't think of themselves like in those terms, in the highest possible terms, I don't trust you. There's something wrong with you if you don't feel that way about yourself. So I think that's what this, that's what this quote is saying, basically.
So I just think that Dr. Seuss, it's a damn crime that they're trying to get rid of him and put him on blast and all this kind of stuff, because he was, as we mentioned before, and we say this over and over again, these great men, guys that really impact history, that are like geniuses and create uniqueness in the world, they are generally eccentric and don't perfectly fit into boxes, and they're not our guy usually, and they're not their guy either, and they're nobody's guy. They're kind of just their own beast. And I think that it's important to recognize them as such and respect it as such, right? And appreciate that. Like, maybe he's not completely my guy, but he did something that was really special and unique, and respect him for that. Respect greatness for the sake of greatness. And I feel that in his own way, maybe not. He's not Alexander the Great. He's not Napoleon or something like this. But Dr. Seuss in the modern world, let's give him some love.
Yeah, I think so. And while at the same time, accepting that like some of his work is better than other parts. I wouldn't read Yertle the Turtle to my kids. That one is pretty subversive. There's a few of them.
What's wrong with Yertle the Turtle?
So Yertle the Turtle is basically like it's blatant anarchist propaganda. Basically, do you know this story? It's a story about a turtle who like is just he wants to be the king of his like little pond or whatever, and he is the king of his pond, but he wants to rule over more. So he like gets all these other turtles and like stands on their back so he could survey like wider and wider domains and everything like that. And he keeps like standing on more and more turtles, and he could see further and further, and he believes that he like rules like wider and wider kingdoms and everything. And it seems to me that it's actually quite blatantly anti-monarchical and anti-authoritarian. And from what I read a little bit about this story in the development of it, originally he actually illustrated this like Yertle, which is the king turtle, with like a Hitler mustache. So there was a very clear, there's a very clear intent about like what this story is about. And even at the very end, it says something about how like, everyone should be free and like whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's just kind of gay. But like I say, some stories are maybe not as cool as others, but there's definitely some like super wholesome ones. You know what I mean? Like, Hop on Pop is another one that was mentioned earlier. That one is really cool because it's really very much for like little kids. It's for like 2 and 3 year olds. Like it's very, very simple, and a lot of it is just about like having fun and stuff. Like there's not really a message behind it. It's just like silly, kooky stuff that's happening, and it's like we like to hop. We like to hop. We like to hop on top of Pop. Stop! You must not hop on Pop. You know what I mean? It's just like funny shit. It's got a very wholesome. If it has a message, it's just a wholesome message of like fun and goofy, like poetry kind of thing, right? But yeah, I mean, some of his stories are better than others, but there's definitely like a lot of really, really good ones. And like I mentioned, the way that he mixes the poetry with like what's actually going on in the story can at times be actually quite brilliant and everything. So yeah, lots of love for Dr. Seuss. Like he created his own world. He's got this psychedelic imagery, psychedelic poetry. He was an American nativist. Yes, he was an anti-fascist and everything, but that was what American nativism was all about at the time. And
they were at war with Germany. Like, what do you?
Yeah, exactly. There is a kind of uneasy relationship, like there, like between obviously, some of the stuff that like these like Imperial Japan and like these other countries stood for was kind of in its own way wholesome, but like at the same time it's a bit of a conflicting thing to have to stand up for one thing or another. I don't envy that at all, but American nativism, good on you guys for being all about like America first or whatever. It's you can't really blame the guy too much for standing for what he did in his own time and place. And there must have been an aspect of it too, of him having like such a German name that's kind of like, he wanted to stand up and be like, no, man, I'm from here kind of thing, right? Like you can't blame the guy for doing that in the context of his time and place.
Yeah.
That was patriotism for him, right? So how can you blame him for that?
Yeah, he was definitely probably overcompensating. He probably got, here's something a lot of folks don't know. During the World Wars, German descended peoples in America got treated like shit. Yeah, like especially World War I and then World War II. Anybody that had a German sounding last name got treated like shit. And about the time of World War I, especially where I'm from in Pennsylvania, most people could speak a little bit of Pennsylvania German, a little bit of Pennsylvania Dutch. Like it was not uncommon for people to be able to speak it. And then after World War I, it got banned from schools. It was like it got persecuted because of the world wars. And it's hard to moralize all of it, because it stings, because that is my native tongue. That is the Muttersprüch, right? And I don't speak it, because my grandpa stopped speaking it, because my grandpa fought in World War II, right? He never taught it to my dad, and my dad doesn't speak any of it, and it got lost because of the geopolitical implications of everything. You know what I mean? Yeah. And here's the deal: is like my grandpa, on my dad's side, if you would have like come up to him and said some shit about German, he would have said the same shit Dr. Seuss said. You know why? Because he went over there and Germans shot at him and tried to kill him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Same thing with my mom's dad. They both my grandparents fought in World War II. Both of them, were in the shit and fought Germans. And, it's a very unfortunate thing. But you know what? You can't really blame guys. You can't really blame like the people. You know what I mean? And it's like the same thing. You can't blame the Russians that fought at Stalingrad. You can't fight, ex guys that fought on this. They're just protecting their home. They're standing up for their country, and they're standing up for who they are. And they developed a hatred for their enemy. And what are you going to do?
This could be said about anything, right? Like you could say this about the American Revolution, right? Like maybe you're a hardcore, Prussian socialist that like is just all about illiberalism and you hate everything to do with the Enlightenment and all of that, everything that America was kind of founded on or whatever. But you at the same time, like living in America, being an American, it's like you have to understand that the people who are fighting in these wars, whether they're like revolutionary wars or whether they're like World War I and II or anything, the people who are fighting in these wars didn't have anything to do with that, right? Even if the war is unjust, like the soldier himself that like fights it is typically fighting for very noble ideals, right? He's fighting for country, home, and hearth, all these things that he should be fighting for. Like if he didn't fight for that, if he just chickened out and didn't want to go and fight, for his country, then that's gay, right? Like there's a line from Homer where like they're like taking the auguries, so they're doing like this like divination by birds, like trying to figure out whether that's like a good time to fight or whatever, whether the gods like are gonna be on their side. And Hector just steps in. He's like, you know what the best fucking sign is? The best sign is fight for your goddamn country, right? Like that's the best sign. So just get out there and do it, right? Like, and he's really expressing something, 2,700 years before our time that resonates with us, right? Like the best sign, the best augury, the best sign from the gods is that your country needs you, so get the fuck out there, kind of thing. I can respect that at the very least. So.
And also, the red pills weren't on the menu back then. the people's countries were unified and believed what their leaders said. You know what I mean? It wasn't. I'm sure there were some dissenters and stuff like that, but as far as the general population goes, when their leaders raised the flag, they were patriotic about it. Doesn't matter where you were, and that this actually, we talked about this in our conspiracy episode that we just did, that I remember being a kid thinking, like conspiracies weren't even a thing. That wasn't we all went to war. We all supported the war in Iraq because we thought they were encroaching upon our freedom. Literally what we thought. And we didn't know. And, and I'll be honest with you, while that supporting that war is a dumb thing and that war was dumb and our leaders were up to no good, et cetera, that instinct to do that is a good thing. Yeah. And I'll stand on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, you can hardly blame Dr. Seuss for living in the time that he did. And that means doing the things that he did and believing the things that he did. So, yeah, man. I think he deserves some respect. So what about modern children's literature, or more modern children's literature, or like kids entertainment? Maybe we should talk about some stuff that's a little bit more contemporary kind of thing. You got anything, Dave?
Well, so I kind of wanted to bring up a little bit of what I was reading when I was a kid. Obviously, when not necessarily like a little kid, but when I started reading for myself and the kind of stuff that I was getting into. Obviously, when I was a kid, I loved the stuff that we were just talking about. But when I got a little bit older, I started reading my own stuff. I started to get into things like Roald Dahl, like the BFG and was some of the giant James and the Giant Peach. I love these stories.
Like Where the Sidewalk Ends and so on and so forth. Was that him? No, that was Shel Silverstein. Sorry.
Yeah. He also did, I think he did Matilda. He did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He has like so many, right? Roald Dahl doesn't really get that much love. And I would actually like to bring him up a little bit because he's under attack too. They're actually rewriting his books now. Cutting out all of the stuff about calling people fat. And they're completely rewriting his books. And Roald Dahl was just like Dr. Seuss insofar as he invented words. He created a beautiful, weird fantasy world that was a little bit psychedelic. And Roald Dahl was actually kind of based. I don't know about his political beliefs, but Roald Dahl, he grew up in England, right? His family were Norwegian immigrants. And Roald Dahl, like Dr. Seuss, was kind of a Chad. Roald Dahl was like 6'6". He was a beast athlete. He was really brilliant, excelled at so many. He was like a type A personality, big, strong, athletic dude, and very talented. And he actually got drafted. He became he got into the British. What's the British Air Force called? British Royal Air Force.
It's called the Royal Air Force.
Yeah. He got pulled into that, and he was actually a fighter pilot in Africa during World War II, and he was one of the poor bastards that got stuck in some of these like outdated what are they called, biplanes or whatever, that have like Yeah, like these like shitty, outdated planes, and where he was fighting was they were really, really understaffed, and they didn't have their planes were busted and didn't run right. They didn't have enough gas a lot of the times. They were pretty much sent out there like with their dick in their hands. And Roald Dahl actually crashed his plane. He actually I don't know if I can't remember if he got shot down or if his plane busted and he just crashed it or whatever. But he had a serious concussion, broke a bunch of ribs, got really injured, and he survived. And, the survival with these planes, these old biplanes or whatever, these bi-wing planes or whatever they're called, was not very high. If you crashed one of these things, you were most likely going to die. And he survived, and he got nursed back to health. He fell in love with his nurse and like married his nurse and all this kind of like crazy stuff. But he was a fucking Chad. The guy was just such a Chad and a warrior and all this kind of stuff. And he went on to write these really beautiful children's stories. The Big Friendly Giant. I love BFG, dude. BFG was like one of my favorites growing up. It's about a little girl that's like so bored, and she comes into contact with this giant who's a big friendly guy. I'm sure everybody remembers that. He Turkish delights and like all that shit, giving her candy and all this kind of, and they go into this other world, and there's like potty humor in it. It's really silly and weird. I loved it. I love Roald Dahl. I think he's a wonderful writer, and obviously had that Seussian flavor of, everybody knows about the snozberries and this snizzlebacks and this snorkelborks and like whatever the fuck he was saying, all his made up words. Really tremendous for kids. And I just loved Roald Dahl. Another one I liked, and it was actually, speaking of Roald Dahl, was what was her name? Beatrix. Oh man, what was her name?
Beatrix Potter.
She did the Here
Peter
Comes
Rabbit.
Peter. Yeah. Peter Rabbit. I love Peter Rabbit, and like these kinds of stories were just great. And then when I got a little bit older, I got into this stuff. Was cool as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s. Mike, do you remember like Mad Magazine and like Tales from the Crypt and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Did you ever read that stuff, or did you?
I would never really got that into it. Somehow, for some reason, I had a friend who lived across the street that was from England, and his family was like very British and everything, and he was like reading the Beano, which was like kind of sort of similar, I guess, at that time, but it had like a completely different cast of characters, like this Dennis the Menace thing. And it was not the one that we know from like the US. It's like this completely different one. So no, I kind like, I was aware, obviously I was aware of Mad Magazine and all of that, but I never really got too far into that. It's funny, like when I was a kid, like I kind of went from like reading kids books to like right into shit like R.L. Stine and like these like horror books and everything. And I started reading Stephen King too when I was very young, which kind of fucked me up a little bit. But anyway, that's another story. In terms of children's literature and everything like that, that was, I guess Mad Magazine isn't really kids literature, but like that is one that I missed though.
Yeah, it was. I don't know if it was. I don't remember anything like really, really too raunchy. It was just kind of silly and absurdism for youth. I thought it was hilarious. It was actually probably kind of subversive. I'm like, I don't really remember, but I did like it. I did think it was funny and weird. But I really loved the spooky comics that were out around that time. They were out for a long time before I was a kid. A lot of like Tales from the Crypt, eerie and creepy. These were out. Some of these came out in like 1950 something, and they stuck around. But I hopped on during the 80s and 90s runs of these publications, and I just loved them. I thought they were just great. Yeah, the storytelling in them was really cool. The art style was really interesting and uncanny and strange, and it was they were just brilliant publications. So I was kind of like you. I went from reading children's literature to like getting into some pretty spooky stuff. I got into Poe very early on. I got into Poe very early on. C.S. Lewis I got into pretty early on. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The first story that I remember, and I've told this story a million times, but is The Hobbit. My grandfather on my mom's side came when he was a little kid. He came to America from Italy, and one of the first books that he read when he learned how to speak English fluently was The Hobbit all by himself. So he read that. He loved it. He thought it was he thought it was just like a beautiful story, and it was. And he read that to me very, very early on before I could read, and that kind of like shaped my whole worldview. That really shaped how I look at literature and everything. I went into a more spooky, weird direction when I got a little older because that's what I was attracted to. But the idea of fantasy, probably why I gush so much about Dr. Seuss and Roald Dahl and these fantasists, is because I it was so formative for me early on, and I do believe I do believe in the arguments that I put forth about the value of fantasism in terms of art and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's really important. It's a really formative influence on kids, especially like older kids, you know, getting from like 8 years old and on, roughly. Obviously it's different for different kids, but like that is an important part of it. Like the creative aspect, the world building aspect. I'm trying to think of like some of the stuff that I was like reading at about that age, and it's funny. It's like hard for me to recall. A little bit later on, as I mentioned, I got into like the horror sort of, you know, like teen horror books, stuff like Christopher Pike. I don't know if you ever read him, or R.L. Stein, which is all very much like probably more famous. Yeah, it was that was really cool. Like I really liked that stuff. I just liked horror at that point. Like I just fucking loved it. I loved horror movies, you know, reading a bit of Stephen King, some of the tamer stuff, but like it's also it was obviously pretty intense for me at that point. And of course, then a little bit later, maybe around like 10 or 11, getting into the Lord of the Rings. This was seriously impactful for me. I won't go too much into that because I'm sure we'll do a Lord of the Rings deep dive at some stage. But yeah, it's like, I mean, there was many books over the years that like kind of shaped and influenced me. One of the ones that actually came very early as a little kid is this book that like, there was this publishing company called Brimax, Brimax. And I've talked about this one book before at some stage, where it's a myths and legends book. So it's a retelling of these stories for kids. I would say probably 7 to 8 and on. But my parents read me this book very, very early, and it's got the real shit, right? It's got like, you know, Jason and the Argonauts. It's got like excerpts from the Iliad. It's got Beowulf. It's got El Cid. It's got like, you know, parts of the Arthurian cycle. It's got like the real stuff, right? The bedrock of our mythology as peoples. And for many, many years, I didn't know, like, you know, I just had this vague recollection of like my parents reading this book to me. And I was like, I asked my dad, this was probably been about 10 years ago now, you know, still as an adult, I just asked him, like, did you ever have this book? Like, it's like book of like myths and legends. I kind of vaguely remember it or whatever. And he's like, oh, I don't know, maybe. Let me look around or whatever. And I forgot about it. And then I like, you know, spoke to him again, maybe like years after that. And he came up to me and he was just like, you asked me about this book. Is this the book you were talking about? And he handed it to me. And I was like, holy fuck, that's the one. Shit. And like, now I've got it, right? And I read it to my kids and everything. But anyway, this Brimax publisher, they did that one, but they also did this one that was like for very, very young children called Teddy. And when I was a kid, you know, very young, I had a teddy bear, and this thing was like this was my best friend, right? This was like, very important to me, this little stuffed animal. And so I had this like little book about this teddy, and it's a very simple book. It's probably like 8 pages long, and it goes like, there's this teddy bear that goes out for a walk, and he brings this umbrella with him, and it begins to rain. So he puts up the umbrella, and then he comes over to a puddle, and he's like takes all these measures of the great pains to like go around the puddle or whatever, and then the rain stops. And he's like looking up at the sky or whatever, and then he like trips over a rock and he falls in the puddle anyway, right? And it's like, it sounds like a very prosaic thing for a little kid, but for some reason it always stuck with me. And I think the reason why is that there's like this almost like Greek tragedy to it. You know what I mean? It's like, despite Teddy's best efforts, like fate intervenes and like he just can't escape his fate. You know what I mean? So this is, I don't know. I remember that book very fondly. And again, it was another one of those ones that my parents kept for me for like 30 years and then like gave to me at some stage. And it's really cute because like my kids, it became like a favorite of theirs too. I don't know why, but yeah. So there you go. But there's a lot of things. There's many contemporary things. I think we should talk a little bit about kids TV shows as well, in addition to literature. This would be like the episode for it. One of the ones, like, because there's a lot of fucking gay ones. There's a lot of like, kids animated TV shows or whatever that like are not very wholesome at all, that like have subversive messaging. It's all about multiculturalism and like, diversity and all kinds of like stupid shit. But there's some that are not. There's some that are actually like kind of based. And it's like the basedness has to be like pushed down. It has to be like below the surface, because otherwise the shit's going to get canceled. But it is there, right? And one of the ones that I find to be more wholesome in this way than anything else is this show called Paw Patrol.
Wow.
Dave knows about Paw Patrol. I think your kids like that one, don't they?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Oh, it's fucking awesome, man. So for people who like don't know about Paw Patrol, like how could you not? It's so there's a character in this boy named Ryder, right? And he leads this team of search and rescue dogs. And each of the dogs has like a different skill set. Like one of them is a police officer, another's like a firefighter, another's like air rescue. There's like a handyman and a construction dog and a Coast Guard dog and all of this shit, right? Yeah. And the job of the team is to protect Adventure Bay, which is this like little town or whatever. It always comes up in the show. It says whenever there's trouble, just yelp for help. And that's like this is a refrain throughout the show. And there don't really seem to be a great deal of like state services in Adventure Bay. Like the government's not really doing much to protect these people. So it's basically the job of Ryder and his team of dogs. So it's funny because like it really pisses off like leftoids. It's just fucking hilarious. They think of it as this like anarcho-capitalist nightmare or whatever. But that's not why it's based. There's a number of reasons why I think it's. So I'm going to make the case for Paw Patrol here.
Let's hear it. I'm interested in this.
All right. So first of all, it enshrines traditional gender roles. There's only one girl dog, right? And she like really looks like a girl. She's a little bit smaller than the others. She's got like a pink outfit. Like even her eyes are pink. It's like fucking hilarious. And like later on, I think that's like for the first season or two, she's like the only one. And there's like 7 of them or something like that. So it's very much, it's very unequal, shall we say. Later on, there's like another like female dog character, but she doesn't like look quite as feminine. Like you can tell that they like, there was pressure, and then they have kind of tried to make good on that, but she's just like way less prominent and like never really took or whatever. So there is that aspect to it. Now, I think even more than that, though, Paw Patrol enshrines authoritarianism, and so here's the case for this. There's a very clear chain of command in Paw Patrol. Ryder is like the paterfamilias. He's like the absolute monarch, right? He's the one that like he calls the shots. He tells the dogs what they're going to be doing and everything. And just beneath Ryder is Chase. So this is the police dog. This is like Ryder's deputy. All of the dogs basically like unquestioningly follow Chase. Like whatever he says, they just do it, right? And then beneath then you've got like the rest of the pups and so on and so forth. So there's a very clear hierarchy. There's a very clear chain of command. There's never any sort of like internal disputes. There's never any like plot sort of points about like, oh, what if Ryder says the wrong thing? No, it just never fucking happens, right? And so we could draw a contrast between this and there's another show that my kids watch called Rainbow Rangers. Dave, I hope you don't know this show because it's actually not terrible, but it's just very different, right? It's this show. They're all that like every single character in the show is female. They're all it's rainbow, right? So it's like they all have a different color and everything. It's very longhoused. It's extremely like matriarchal. There's this like the matriarch Kalia, who is like basically the ruler over Kaleidoscopia. And she has these like 7 different rangers that are these little girls with different powers. Like one has music power, the other one has animal power, and the other one has like inviso power and all this shit. The only male character in Rainbow Rangers is Floof, who is the unicorn, only male protagonist, and the only thing he can do is just like run around and be retarded and say Floof. That's it. That's all he can say. That's all he can do. The only other male in the show that I'm aware of is the antagonist. This is Preston Praxton. He's the phenotypically Aryan looking, like blonde-haired, blue-eyed, like greedy capitalist guy or whatever. And anyway, a typical plot in Rainbow Rangers is that Kalia, the matriarch, notices that there's a problem somewhere in Kaleidoscopia, so she will like summon the Rangers. Then they decide as a group who should go fix the problem. Then she'll send them out and then sit on her ass and do nothing. And then the girls, like, however many of them go out, they then work together based on their different abilities. There's nobody in charge. Things just kind of happen spontaneously, like order arises contractually. Everyone just like always works together and everything like that. It's a very egalitarian show in the way that it works. Paw Patrol is very different by contrast. So a typical Paw Patrol episode will go something like this. One of the people in Adventure Bay gets into a jam. Usually it's Mayor Goodway, who is this person of color.
It's a woman, right? Mayor Goodway.
Yeah, it's like a brown woman that's like just completely idiotic. Yeah. So anyway, the rider will then tell the pups what they're going to do, and then they just do it, right? There's no questioning. And then they go into the field. They all follow his directions. Like Chase, the police dog, sometimes will give directions on his behalf or whatever. But there's like the team works together because there's this definite principle of authority. And then they'll like extricate the denizens of Adventure Bay from whatever jam or whatever. Ryder congratulates them and lets them know they did a good job. It's just way more authoritarian.
Definitely geared towards boys.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's very masculine. It's very action packed and like not violent, but there's like just a lot of action and everything like that. There's a lot of like sirens and shit like that going off and like crazy stuff happening and everything. So another thing that I think's based about it is that it's very caste based. You know what I mean? Like the leader is just unquestionably of a different caste than the others, right? He's the human and they're the dog. So there's this like qualitative difference between the leader and the team or whatever. Like the one higher up the food chain gets to rule and the rest just like owe him obedience. like, and in the case of in Paw Patrol, there's just like never a question of who's in charge, right? So the only other last thing I'll say here about like why it's based is that like the POCs in the show, which is mainly this Mayor Goodway, she's like vaguely brown, she's incompetent, she's obsessed with her pet chicken Chickaletta. You know, like this is like what, instead of like actually running the show, she's like mainly just sort of like obsessing over this chicken or whatever. She's kind of like panicky and unstable. She has poor judgment. She's exactly the kind of person who does not belong in an executive role, right?
Yeah, she's like an undeserving diversity hire.
Exactly. So good. And very often she'll like initiate the plot by like, you know, like causing the problem that like needs to be rescued or whatever, just because she's so incompetent and stupid. So that's Paw Patrol for you.
Do you have a favorite? Who's your favorite dog?
Oh fuck yeah, probably Chase. Yeah, probably the police officer dog. I mean, like I'm not out here like defending cops or whatever, but like yeah, he's definitely the hero character. He's never scared. He's like, come on, gang, let's go. He's like he's never scared. He never like doubts himself. He's like, you know, Ryder needs our help. Let's go. And they just never. I like Rubble. He's my favorite because he's kind of like he's the bulldog. Is he?
He's the bulldog. He's always like, let's break it up. Let's smash it.
He's a construction dog. No. He's the handyman, isn't he?
Yeah, he's his truck is almost like Do you remember the cartoon Thundercats?
Yeah.
Do you remember the tank?
Oh fuck, I don't remember the name.
What was the vehicle called? It was like every episode it had a different ability. It would like come out with saws, then it would have missiles, and then it would have a grappling hook, and then it would have like whatever they needed, right? Thundercats. It would just have whatever they needed. And that's he kind of reminds me that he's also, because he's a bulldog, he's like the strong guy, and he's like, I got this, get out of the way. He just always smashes something, and I don't know, I just think Rubble's based.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. It's funny, like you could totally see why kids like why they like that show, and it's also, I mean, the animation style is exactly the style that I hate. You know what I mean? It's just exactly that CGI style that's got these like flat textures that are just kind of, they just don't look at all real, or I don't know, they just don't look good or whatever. It's cheap looking animation, but it's like the plot is just like, it's just so good, man. Like I'm always like happy to let my kids watch that one.
Yeah. I have boys, so I have heard Paw Patrol, be there on the double. I've heard that probably a million times. I've heard fucking what's the other one? They like blazing the monster machines. Like it's like which is also it's another kind of based one. It's like obviously there's some stuff in it that folks would probably disagree with, but the core of the story is there's like one dude, a kid, and he all his friends are monster trucks, and they go and they just like race around and solve problems and go on adventures, and it's not that bad. Another one that my kids loved was Thomas the Tank Engine. Thomas was like, they love Thomas, so, and Thomas is my favorite character in Thomas is like Sir Topham Hatt, because he's just like, I think he's an analog for a capitalist, because he owns what's their I forget what their like little town's called, but he's like, he owns it, right? He's the boss, and he has the top hat, and Sir Topham Hatt, but he's also a huge retard and like screws everything up. And Thomas and his friends always have to fix it, right? They always have to go and do something. And you know what? It's always like more like always stick by your friends, always be brave. It's not bad. What's funny about that show is that they're all shit talking each other all the time, though. It's like a little bit gossipy. Do you know what I mean? Like they kind of all hate each other a little bit.
but like, there is something base to it, like something kind of wholesome, which is that like all of the tank engines are like, their worth is basically wrapped up in their work. You know what I mean? It's like their worth is based on what they can contribute. And there's something wholesome about that. You know what I mean? Like it's just, I think that teaches a good lesson. You know what I mean? It's funny how like, here's the thing. A lot of times like people get all like pissed off and hung up about shit, like with say Paw Patrol, for example. A lot of leftoids hate this show for the reasons that I've outlined. But like one of the other reasons that they hate it for is that like they talk about how, it's priming kids to, hate the government and to believe that like these rescue services can only be provided by like capitalist Marx capitalist other like bullshit like that, right? Kids don't pick up on that shit, right? They do not pick up on the broader societal themes. Maybe like later they'll kind of like absorb some of that by osmosis a little bit, but they do pick up on the interpersonal relationships between the characters. That's what kids look at. They pick up on the small scale interactions. And it's here that like stuff like Thomas the Tank Engine and Paw Patrol and stuff like that kind of shines, right? Like Paw Patrol, for example, it tells kids that there's a definite hierarchy in society. It also teaches that like the classes can collaborate together, right? Like Ryder is the high caste who just looks different than the others, and the dogs work with him. Like there's rarely, like maybe never, conflicts of authority in that show. The Paw Patrol team never fucking disagrees about anything ever. The show depicts a world where hierarchy and authority just fucking works. Right? It's like this quasi-feudal world of corporativism where the body politic just works in harmony. And like Marxoids and like leftists and shit, they really don't like this, which is why they like, soil themselves in public over this show. It's really hilarious to watch. I don't know.
Another one they really hate that I see all the time them complaining about? Peppa Pig.
Really?
Yeah, they hate Peppa Pig.
What's wrong with from their perspective? What's wrong with Peppa Pig? That seems that's hard for me to understand.
All the pigs are with pigs. All the sheep are with sheep. All the all the cows are cows, and all their kids are cows. And they say that it promotes like segregation and ethnocentrism and all this kind of stuff. And I mean,
it's interesting that you say that, because when I watched that show, like my kids like it too. When I watched that show, I was a little bit like, I think that it actually kind of is like teaching the wrong lessons, because yes, okay, the pigs go with pigs and the sheep go with sheep, like families or whatever, but they're all in the same city, right? And they all go to the same school, and like it's like this sort of like it's a very diverse environment, you know what I mean? So I actually kind of like approaching it from the opposite standpoint, thought it goes too far in that direction, you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I just like the idea that, I mean, I can understand why like Marxists hate that shit, like, hate like the traditional family structure of like a real fucking family. But like, I don't know. I just think that like Peppa Pig concedes too much anyway. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
but there's like, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I do take issue, as I mentioned before, I do take issue with the new like art style. It is so completely different. The cartoons that I watched when I was a kid, things like He-Man and G.I. Joe and Thundercats and stuff like that, pre Nickelodeon stuff. It was just so different. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just thought that stuff was way better. My kids got into it. We watched. There was a imagining. It was like of He-Man, of Masters of the Universe. It came out in like 2004 or something like that. And it was actually really great. It was actually might have been better than the original.
Wow.
And I sat down and watched it with my kids, and they fucking loved it because it's weird. It's got magic and action. He-Man's He-Man. So it's another one that I actually just like adored. I watched it with my kids as an adult. I didn't even watch it when it came out because I was a little bit too old. Was The Last Airbender. Did you watch that at all?
I don't know that one.
Yeah, it was like it was on Nickelodeon. Probably I think it was either late 90s or early 2000s or something like that. And it's about this you know, the whole story is there are different like nations of people, and these nations of people have their own kind of magic that they use. And they're the Fire Nation, and they're kind of like the bad guys, and they're trying to take over the world. And a bunch of the other ones are kind of like you know, kind of opposing them a little bit. And one of the nations is like it got exterminated in a great war. And one of the airbenders survived, and they thawed him from ice. He came out of this like ice or whatever, and they go on this journey to kind of like fight the Fire Nation and save the world. And there's a lot of philosophical stuff in it, and it's actually a really great show, really well written. There's the only thing I can think of that's a little bit like is one of the female characters who's like the sister of like one of the team members is kind of girl bossy and bitchy and stuff like that. Yeah. But she later on like kind of lets go of that and becomes more feminine as she like becomes more comfortable with herself. She like grows out of girl boss bitchy mode and becomes like a loving girlfriend to this other character and like a supportive kind of girl. And it's actually a really great series. Yeah, it's actually pretty wholesome. It's actually pretty great.
Nice. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I don't know too many like actual cartoons that I would put in that camp. I'm trying to think of something in this vein to say about SpongeBob, but I don't know. I kind of like SpongeBob. I think it's good for the kids. This is the one that my kids have just discovered. It was weird because my eldest, she found SpongeBob scary for some reason when she was like younger, and like it was just like, I don't like that shit. And then only now has kind of discovered it. I don't know. I like it. I think it's cool. But yeah, I would like to before we before we end this thing, I'd like to go through a few books that I'd like recommendations I would give to people who have kids and want some stuff that's like pretty wholesome that they could read to their children and just like, know that it's going to like actually enshrine good lessons and not subversion and shit like that. Cause there's so much of that stuff. The first one that I was thinking of is this one called The Kitten Who Thought He Was a Mouse. Now, I'll just say this in general. If you get like the little golden books, the ones from the 50s and stuff, those pretty much as a rule are can't miss. Like it's good. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing in there that's going to be terrible or whatever. But this one is especially hilarious. When I read it, I was just like, it's funny. I actually like, I started looking up Amazon reviews of it. I just like instantly went to the 1-star reviews. And sure enough, there was somebody who'd picked up on the exact same fucking thing that I picked up on it. So anyway, this book is called The Kitten Who Thought He Was a Mouse. So the story goes that there's a family of mice that adopts this kitten. They raise him to be a mouse, just the same as any of their mouse children. And he proves really useful to the family. Like he can fool the household cat. He can like find and bring back potato skins and so on. And then one day, this cat, just raised in the family of mice, discovers a bowl full of milk. And then he drinks it and he's like, oh, this is the best shit ever. And like, it turns out that the human children in this house have been like trying to draw him out of hiding or whatever. So after this, he decides just to be a cat after all. And he leaves his mouse family. So this and what I picked up on from this is it really enshrines like racial essentialism in like a really hilarious way. It's you know, I mean, a cat is a cat, and there's nothing that you can do to change. Like, it's like a leopard can't change his spots kind of thing, right? That is the lesson from this book, right? You get this cat that's just like raised completely in an environment where he's supposed to be, you know, environmentally trained to be a mouse or whatever, but like his cat nature just like keeps coming back, and eventually it just takes over, right? And it's, I don't know, it's just funny. It's very much against like magic dirt theory, right? Like, no, however long this like other ethnicity is among like its host population, it will never truly be the same. You know what I mean? That's just like, it's such a nice, it's such a wonderful story. And I thought it was funny that like somebody in the 1-star, like wrote a 1-star review on Amazon of this book and was like saying pretty much exactly the same thing. It's like, this is very disturbing how the cat can't be a mouse ever, and it's like not teaching the right lessons to children, and all this shit, right?
Please.
But it's not. They're right. They're absolutely right. This is the kind of shit that, like, you know, it's a great lesson for kids anyway. Yeah. Another one that I read to my kids. My kids really love bunnies. They love rabbits. It's just a thing in our house or whatever. There's this one called Home for a Bunny, and it's a very simple story. So in the spring, this bunny comes down the road and he's looking for a home. And throughout the story, he just, you know, he talks to all different kinds of animals and asks the animal, hey, can I come live with you? You know, he talks to a robin, he talks to a frog, he talks to a groundhog, and they all turn him away for different reasons, or he just like doesn't want to live there. He's like, yeah, I can't live in your nest. I'd fall out of the nest. Or I can't live in the bog. I would drown in the bog or whatever. So it's all not a good fit for him. Finally, he comes down the road, comes across another bunny, and the bunny decides that, you know, this bunny decides that he belongs with his own kind and makes a home with the other bunny anyway. And I think the lesson in this one is pretty clear, right? It's like the creatures, you know, birds of a feather flock together, right? It's like creatures belong with their own kind. Creatures are fitted to kind of like live among their own kind. And it's a very short step between that and something like, well, ethno-nationalism or whatever, you know what I mean? This is a very comfortable fit with this story. Another one that my kids really, really like is Rumpelstiltskin, which is a very problematic story if you read a little bit below the surface. For guys who don't know much about their folk tales, Rumpelstiltskin the story is that there's a man who tells the king that his daughter can spin straw into gold. So the king then takes the daughter and demands that she do just that, right? Which she obviously can't. So there's this like creepy ass little man that appears and makes her promise different things in order to, you know, do what the king is asking of her. And then the situation just keeps escalating day after day to where she eventually has to promise her firstborn baby. And eventually the girl, you know, because she does spin the straw or whatever, she marries the prince and then has a baby with him or whatever. And then the creepy little man shows up, and then she refuses to give him the baby. And he says that if she can guess his name, he won't take it from her or whatever. And then there's this like woodcutter that hears the man like dancing around this fire or whatever and say his name. And then the woodcutter tells the girl, she guesses his name, and the little man fucks off. So there's actually quite a bit under the surface of this story, I would say. First of all, there's the lesson that physiognomy never lies, right? The little man is this like little stunted, weird looking creature. It's not quite, almost not even human or whatever. And there's something really creepy about him. There's something wrong with him, right? Like he wants the baby. Like there's something weird. There's also a vague kind of insinuation of a racial dimension to this character, if you know what I mean. There's this creepy little man. He's got this bizarre name. There's an unhealthy obsession with children or whatever. He's like definitely meant to be a particular kind of minority. You know what I mean? And actually, as I was looking into this, turns out that there was a handwritten note in the original edition of the Grimm's Kinder- und Hausmärchen, I think it was called, their story, the book where this is written, and it gives an alternate version of the tale where the alternate version goes that in a nutshell, that there's a wife that passes by a garden with cherries, and then she helps herself to the cherries, and then there's this black man that comes out of the earth and tells her that she has to promise her child to him. Then when the child's born, he comes for it, and he'll only leave if she can guess his name. And then there's something kind of analogous to the woodcutter. There's like a man that follows him and sees him climb into a cave and like say his name. So the whole thing plays out the same way. But there's definitely there's definitely an ethnic dimension to that character, the Rumpelstiltskin character. And another thing, and this may be, again, this may be a little bit sort of high level for kids to understand, but I think that they kind of get it in the end, is that there are limits to like contractualism, basically. So the point of the story is that the woman makes a deal with this like creepy little weird man and breaks the deal, right? And then, but like she's morally justified in breaking the deal because he basically goes too far. There's like some things that you should not be allowed to like ask people to part with, right? Like like their children, for example. So there are kind of like limits to what libertarians might call voluntarism. And I think that there's also another dimension to it as well that's like a little bit more traditional, in that it's okay to like lie to an enemy. It's okay to break a contract with somebody who is not your friend or is like an ethnic competitor or whatever. We could think of like Havamal 42, right? Like that stanza where it says, repay a gift with a gift, mockery with mockery, treachery with treachery, right? There's like, you don't have to be a nice and upstanding and like, honest person with people who are not honest with you, kind of thing. And this is really, I think, something that it's, people need to get through their heads a bit more, right? Like, white people tend to be taken advantage of because they're too fucking honest with people with whom they should not be honest, right? It's just like, it kind of goes to like moral particularism, basically, that like you don't owe duties to some people. There are like the horizon of moral care only extends so far. We could think of the episode in the Volsunga saga where Sigmund and Sinfjotli, they robbed the travelers, right? And the idea being that your duties to people really do depend on who they are and what their relation to you are. Like there are some people who are completely outside of your moral horizon, and there are some people to whom you owe no moral consideration at all, basically. And Rumpelstiltskin is basically one of those people. So tricking him into breaking the contract is not at all immoral. I don't think so. There's lots of others. There's lots of other books. I'll put a list of them into the show notes, but I thought those ones kind of deserved a little bit of a little bit of an exposition there.
Yeah. A couple recommendations from me would be these are a little bit more modern. I love the series The Hardy Boys. For folks that haven't heard of that, the Hardy Boys are about it's two brothers, Frank and Joe, and they go on adventures together and they uncover mysteries, and some of the mysteries are spooky and some of them are fun and some of them are dangerous, and they go and uncover treasure and they find artifacts and sneak into sewers and like do all kinds of like cool little boy stuff, and they go on boy adventures, and it's really wholesome. It came out like back in the day. I would suggest they actually rewrote a lot of them. So if you can, I believe in like 19, no, it wasn't even 19. It was like recently in 20 something, like 20, I don't know, 2005. They went and like rewrote a bunch of shit. So you got to go find the shit that came out that was printed before the 80s.
The OG
it was actually,
ones.
yeah, the OG one. You find the OG ones there. That's good stuff because they didn't just like write out. They didn't just like get rid of like, you know, racial stuff. They got rid of a lot of other stuff too, right? They rewrote everything about it and completely made it gay. So go get the old school Hardy Boys. So wholesome, so based and fun, great for little boys. Another one I would recommend for little girls is the Nancy Drew series. Dude, Nancy Drew was really cool for little girls. It was about a little girl that, you know, she would go on her own little adventures, and she was like a detective kind of thing, and it was really cool. Another one I would suggest for little boys, Encyclopedia Brown. For folks that aren't familiar, this was a series that was out. I think it started in the 50s and kind of went down in the 80s. Old school. It's another kind of detective little boy thing. It's about this kind of boy genius and his group of friends, and they always uncover mysteries and find stuff out. So Encyclopedia Brown is another cool one. So those are some recommendations I would put forth that came out in okay, never mind, I was wrong. Hardy Boys came out in the 20s. So there's some stuff so
that's really old. I thought it was like the 50s. Wow.
Yeah, it came out, I believe it started being published in like 1927. So it started out as like a pulp book, and then later it survived up for a long time. And the guy that supposedly wrote it was something, I can't remember his name, William Dixon or something, isn't one guy. William Dixon is just like a pen name that multiple authors used. So really good stuff.
Yeah, if you scratch below the surface, and especially, I mean, this kind of goes without saying, but if you look back in time, before the 50s, especially before the 60s, you're going to find some good stuff. You're going to find some really wholesome stuff for kids. There's so many good ones. And here's the thing: you should be reading to your kids. Like, again, it kind of goes without saying, like, no shit. But like, the fact is, if you establish a ritual where at the end of the day, no matter what happens, no matter who has done what or been naughty or done the wrong thing or done the right thing or whatever it is, if you establish a thing where at the end of the day, the kids sit down with dad and they just read a story before bed, this is going to put good, wholesome, happy feelings into the kids when it comes time to open a book and, read anything, right? Like read for pleasure or read for study or read for school. So many things in life, when it comes to, being a success in life, are about habit, right? This is old. This goes back to Aristotle. Aristotle said the same thing, is that being a good person is about having good habits, right? And part of having good habits is establishing good feelings and associations, happy associations with things that are healthy and wholesome. And reading is one of those things. Reading is one of those. It's so important for children. So important for, everyone. Like, sadly, I mean, obviously I would say this, I run a book publishing company and so does Dave, but it's very, very sad that the vast majority of people after high school don't ever really read another book. That's something that you have, as a parent, you have control over. I mean, only some control, but you have quite a bit of control. You can inculcate those happy, warm, familial feelings with reading. So it's really important that you do that. And the way you can do that is just by having a ritual every single day, whether it's in the morning or we do it at night, just before bed. There's story time before bed, and dad is the storyteller. The kids get to have their their little chews of books. You know, we alternate and everything like that. But it's a thing. It's something that we do every single night. It's almost like a little ceremony. And no matter what's happened, everything gets put aside, all the bullshit, you know, if there's stress in the house, and we just do the story. And this is really, really important for the kids. So I would highly recommend that. I cannot recommend more strongly that you instill a love of reading in your children. And beyond that, you have to instill a love of reading of the right kind of material, right? So we're hopefully in this episode, we've given some ideas of like the kind of stuff that you can read. Dr. Seuss is really good. The Little Golden Books are really good. The Hardy Boys are really good, but there's so many other ones as well. This is something that, you know, we need to talk about. This is something that needs to be discussed in our circles. We have a whole sort of subgenre of based parenting advice. And this is something that I don't really see talked about too much. What should you be reading to your kids? And, you know, I've seen there's new publishing companies that are doing like books for children and everything. Paul Wagner came out with his own book for kids. Unfortunately, I haven't read it. I know that Little Frog I forget. It's the Antelope Hill imprint. I forget what the exact name of it is, but they're doing their own stuff. There's lots of good things that are happening in this regard, and it's very encouraging to see that, because, you know, this is an important part of people's childhood. I have my favorites. There's so many books that like impacted me. The Lord of the Rings, these like earlier books as a kid, this like Teddy book, all these little things, they all add up. So yeah, I would very strongly recommend that parents inculcate a love of reading in their kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also I would like to point out that I think part of the reason that people stop reading after they're out of school is not necessarily just because they're dum-dums or because there's so many entertainment distractions, is because a lot of the literature that they make us read in school is boring and gay and sucks. Yeah. And after we get out of school, it's like, you know, it's like, oh, well, then you just associate reading with being boring. And I think it's important to show your kids things that are fun and exciting, and especially encourage them in their teenage years to, like, because everybody, it doesn't matter who you are, especially if you're a boy, dude, school, you just think school's gay. You know what I mean? I homeschool my kids, so it's a little bit different, but I have folks out there send their kids to public or private schools or whatever kind of schools. If you're a kid, you're going to think that school's corny and gay. It's just the way that it is. And you're going to associate what you read there. You as a parent, it's up to you to show them the cool stuff that makes them excited about reading and helps them to continue on reading. And as a teenager, I can't think of anything better than something like Conan or Tarzan, Edgar Rice Burroughs, you know, all the cool stuff like that. You know what I mean? Adventure kind of stuff. I don't know, maybe something like Doc Savage, right? Just stuff that is just based and masculine and it focuses on adventure instead of like trying to put, relevant, I guess, socio-political ideas in their heads or whatever the fuck they're trying to do.
It just has to be fun and cool and not gay. Like
that's
at the end
it.
of it. Yeah. And like that actually reminded me that, Dave, that you mentioned those books. There's one that we read regularly. It's like way over my kids' head, but they still love it, which is this book called Just So Stories by Rudyard Kipling, who is a very, very based poet. And these Just So stories, they're just like these little sort of like almost origin stories of like how the elephant got his long nose, or so on and so forth. It's just these goofy little stories that like use a lot of these proto-Dr. because it's an old one, proto-Dr. Seussian like rhyme schemes and like nonsense lyrics and stuff like that. It's like I mean, the level of like education has fallen so low now that like this would be challenging even for some adults to read, but it's a kid's story, a series of kids' stories. I would highly recommend picking that up for your kids. They'll love it, man, because it's got like the crazy internal rhyming and the like just bizarre stuff going on. Like my kids love it, and they're young, but they don't love it because they're like super brilliant and understand everything. They just love it because it sounds cool. You know what I mean? Like that goes so far in making reading fun and good and cool and something that you want to do. So yeah, there's lots. I mean, when you scratch below the surface, I mean, yes, start with Dr. Seuss, start with the Hardy Boys, start with all these other ones that we're talking about. But there's lots of good stuff out there. Don't be afraid to like buy a bunch of shit and then throw 3/4 of it away if it sucks. Do what you have to do to like make kids love books, because man, I mean, if your kids love books, they're always going to know how to teach themselves, right? This is one of the most important things you can teach kids, is how to learn, not just what to learn or like the content of things that you need to know, but also just like the process of learning itself. You have to inculcate in them a love of learning, and inculcating them the love of literature and books is an important step in that direction.
Exactly. Big time. All right, Mr. Mike, we are over 2 hours, so I think it's a good time to shut it down. I hope this episode was informative, and I bet there's a lot of dads out there listening to this. They're like, they're feeling us on a lot of these things that we were talking about today with the different shows and all of this kind of stuff. But, you know, I appreciate you guys, and I hope that this was informative and meaningful to you. And if you're not signed up already, make sure to go to imperiumpress.org/podcast and go get signed up at the Gumroad, so you get all the great perks that Imperium Press is offering. Hardback books, so much great stuff over there. And also you get Culture Dads every single week. You can't beat it. You can't beat it. Go get signed up if you're not already, and help Imperium Press save the Western canon from those who wish to erase it. If you want to check out what I'm doing, go to thebizarrearchives.com and go buy books. Dude, Dave Martell's got a book out right now, The Weird Works of Dave Martell. Yours truly, poetry and fiction. Go get yourself a copy. That's available only on Amazon right now, but you might get some in the shop. Also Twitter and Telegram at The Bizarre Archives. And I'll see you guys next time. Hail.